Welcome to the channel. Eskimo just sat there at the table, alternating between frozen and shaking, seemingly unaware what was going on around him. Other players at the table noticed that something seemed to be wrong with Eskimo because he started his action by throwing 2 chips into the pot, but he had a third and he wasn't completing it. He just kind of sat there frozen. It didn't take long before people started to figure out that, something was wrong with Eskimo. By the time they did, he came out of it. He was back to, mostly his normal self. He continued play. Tournament staff came over. Other players at the table recommended that he go get himself checked out, but Eskimo was having none of it. He was the chip leader in the Raz event, and it had the potential to be the best cash of his career. So there's no way Eskimo was going. What he did, though, was he took a break. He went outside, he had a cigarette, he came back in, and in the rest of the tournament that he was in, he took 4th place. He had apparently 14 mini strokes. A little more on Eskimo coming right up. But first, if you'd like the video, appreciate it if you click the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, it really helps us for our channel growth if you click on subscribe. I hope you're enjoying the series, and I always appreciate the comments. Before I get into the background of Paul Eskimo Clark, I just want to throw out a little disclaimer here because I don't want anybody to accuse me of being too harsh on the guy. I played with the guy at Caesars, and he was not really terribly approachable. He wasn't a mean guy, at least outwardly to me or anyone that I saw him play with. But, he was a loner, and he liked his space, and most people gave him that space. And when people didn't, that's when he would, his irritation was visible. But, all in all, he was a nice guy, at least my dealings with him. I know other people say other things, but I do have a few things to say about him that may sound a little harsh, and I just want to throw that out there. Eskimo was an old school degenerate. He was always broke. He was always looking for a steak, always taking his poker winnings next door to the sports book. That was Eskimo. Author Nolan Dalla described sitting next to Eskimo at the tables as being next to a farm animal. He said that Eskimo would rather load up on those little 99-cent shrimp cocktails you could get downtown than order a decent meal at the table. Eskimo just did not want to deplete his bankroll on things like good meals or hotel rooms. Eskimo started life as one of 7 children in his family's home in Stockton, Missouri. He later lived in New Orleans and served in Vietnam as a medic. He wasn't married and had no kids. There's honestly not much else known about his personal life. That was Eskimo. Quiet, a loner. Fun fact, the name Eskimo had no connection to his being or even having visited Alaska. Eskimo was tagged because of his appearance. He was a big burly guy, and he looked like he just kind of, stepped out from the Yukon or the frozen tundra. His tournament successes included 3 World Series bracelets. He won in 7-card stud, Raz, and 7-card stud high-low. He cashed in dozens of tournaments over the years, and he had earnings exceeding $2.7 million. But while Eskimo was thrifty with his spending on creature comforts, he had major leaks with sports betting. In a 2015 article on Eskimo, Dallas says that he believes that Eskimo made his losses sound worse than they were, and that was probably because he was always looking for a stake for his next game. On June 18, 2007, Eskimo suffered his 14 mini-strokes at the table at the Raz event. And sadly, that's all a lot of people know about Eskimo. He was the chip leader. He didn't want to go. He was stubborn. Who counted that it was 14 and not 10 or 8 or whatever? Who knows? But it does seem like it was quite a few of those mini-strokes. Eskimo died on April 15, 2015. In typical Eskimo secretive fashion, the poker world didn't learn of his death until June. Eskimo is 67 years old. Eli Elezra has had quite the journey from Israel to Las Vegas. The 62-year-old businessman, high-stakes cash game player, and winner of 5 WSOP bracelets, has always set lofty goals for himself, and usually met them. As a young man in Israel in the late 1970s, Eli wanted to join the Israeli Defense Force, but not just as a regular infantry soldier, but as a member of the elite Golani Brigade. He so wanted to be in the Golani Brigade that he refused orders that were going to place him in the Israeli Air Force. This insubordination put him in jail. He only spent 3 weeks in jail as it became apparent that he wasn't avoiding military service. He just wanted to be in the Golani Brigade. He eventually got in the brigade and he made the rank of lieutenant. and most likely would have climbed higher had it not been for an injury sustained in Lebanon in 1982 that ended his military career. Once discharged, he moved to the United States, first to Alaska, where he both worked and learned poker. In 1988, Eli moved to Las Vegas and continued his hard work. He owns or has owned nearly 24 businesses in Las Vegas. In addition to the enormous amount of time he spent managing his businesses, Eli found time to play high-stakes cash games. He shied away from tournament poker and kind of focused on the cash games, but then that changed when the poker boom started and people like he and Chip Reese and Sammy Farha started playing the high-profile tournament events because of the potential for major cash. Eli's first big tournament payday was a 2004 WPT Mirage Poker Showdown, when he won just over $1 million, beating a final table that included Gabe Kaplan, John Juanda, and Scotty Wynn. Poker TV viewers who didn't know much about Eli got to see him on several appearances on high-stakes poker. Eli was a fan favorite for his easygoing, fun personality and his poker skills. Today at 62, Eli's sharp as ever, and he continues to cash and do well. In 2022, he won a WPT high roller event at Bellagio, and he also won his 5th WSOP bracelet. Jennifer Jennicide Leigh was part of the first crop of online poker wizards that stood out primarily to younger players because of her skills playing online. The Delaware native described herself as a nerd with a knowledge of computer languages and a love of online worlds such as World of Warcraft. She made a name for herself while playing online in both cash games and tournaments. Her live tournament results didn't match her online performance, though. She won a match of the Poker Royale Battle of the Ages, if you remember that one. That was basically a sit and go. Her best live cash was placing 18th in a World Series of Poker event in 2006. I played once with her in a tournament in downtown Vegas at Binion's. The table also featured Richard Quiet Lion Brodie. I'm throwing that name out there because I want to know how many of you are thinking to yourselves right now, oh yeah, I remember that guy. Isn't that the guy that invented Word? Yeah, he is. The highlight of the tournament, though, for me was that all the attention focused on Jennifer. She really wasn't that good at live tournament play, but she was easily the best-looking woman in the room, and so all the guys were, oogling. She used this attention to gain exposure for herself with appearances in Maxim and Playboy magazines. She appears to have pivoted from the public exposure poker gave her and has moved on. Her Twitter is active, and she describes herself as a homeschooling mom, security and privacy nerd, and several other titles that blue-check people on Twitter think is important for the rest of us to know. At 79 years old, Miami John Cernuto is still very active as a poker player. He frequently plays Omaha and horse tournaments at the Orleans in Vegas. Miami John was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, and graduated from Florida State University with a degree in finance. However, after graduation, he became an air traffic controller. That worked out well for him until 1981. If you recall, President Reagan fired controllers that were on strike, and John was one of those fired. So he used it as an opportunity to change his career, and his new career? Poker. John was considered an Omaha specialist, but excelled at several games. His first cash in the WSOP was in 1989 in the $5,000 7-card stud event. He's won 3 bracelets, one in 1996, 1997, and 2002. Now, if you thought Eskimo Clark would be the only player in this video who had a medical episode at the table, you'd be wrong. During day 2 of the WSOP $2,500 Raz event in 2009, Cernuto collapsed at the table. Other players at first thought he dozed off. Another player nudged him, and then he collapsed onto the table. Cernuto regained consciousness, but unlike Eskimo, he followed the advice of paramedics and was wheeled out of the event. He had suffered from internal bleeding and was hospitalized. John got better and continued to have a successful career. I encourage you to go look at his Hendon Mob results. It's really, really, really quite impressive. It's just an insane amount of cashes over the years. The guy has played a ton of tournament poker. Where to start with Prahlad Friedman? Poker player? Rapper? Spirit Rock? Friedman versus Jeff Lisandro? Friedman versus Ted Bort versus Mike Mustafa? I could do an entire episode just on the drama that used to swirl around Prahlad Friedman. But for the sake of brevity, let's just go through the cliff notes. He had success in both online and live play. In 2003, he won his only WSOP bracelet in the $1,500 pot limit hold'em event. He won the WPT 2009 championship at the Bicycle Casino in Los Angeles. That netted him just over $1 million. In total, his live tournament earnings were just over $2.5 million. Prahlad, like Brad Booth, who was featured in an earlier episode, found himself losing considerable sums of money to unknown players who turned out to be Russ Hamilton's God Mode accounts. Overall, Hamilton is reported to have taken players for at least $22 million. Prahlad claims that $3 of those $1 million came from him. Ironically, Friedman in 2010 signed with Ultimate Bet as a pro. He claimed that UB was under new management, but people still seem puzzled as Prahlad had always been down on players signing with, poker sites. Only later in 2018 did he admit that UB had paid him $1 million of his losses. They paid that back to him when he signed with them in 2010. Most of us remember the live incidents involving Prahlad, the most notorious being the 2006 wsop main event dust-up that he had with Jeff Lisandro. Friedman claimed that Lisandro didn't post his 5,000 chip ante. Lisandro said he did. The two players argued back and forth. The dealer said, "Don't worry about it, we got it taken care of." Prahlad accused Lisandro of basically cheating out another player who Prahlad thought had to post the ante twice. As it turned out, one of the blinds posted his blind, but he failed to post the ante, which happens in tournament play, especially back then when a lot of tournaments, people weren't used to antes. So, Lisandro was correct. Prahlad was wrong. Prahlad eventually tried to apologize to Lisandro, but Lisandro was having none of it. Today, the 44-year-old Prahlad lives in Brazil. His Twitter's active if you want to check it out. He's a rapper still. There's a link to a tune that he just released. Tune. You can see how old I am when I'm saying tune. To a rap that he just released I guess he's in. Anyway, it's on Spotify. If you want to go to his Twitter, you can see that. And you can also see that he still has his conspiracy theories about cheating in poker. So it's worth the read. In the last episode, we featured Phil Ivey, who I claimed was the best poker player on the planet. There was a time in the early 2000s where many thought the same thing about Gus Hansen, while others thought that he was a flash in the pan. Gus landed somewhere in the middle, smart, reckless, prone to wild swings and bankroll, and for me at least, a bit of an underachiever from what he could have become. The Great Dane was born on February 13, 1974. He spent most of the next 30 years in Copenhagen, but moved to Monaco in 2003. Gus started playing poker as an exchange student at UC Santa Cruz. In addition to poker, Gus was a youth tennis champion back in Denmark and a world-class backgammon player. His live tournament success started right at the beginning of the poker boom. He was the first player to win 3 WPT Open events. He won the 2002 Five Diamond World Poker Classic, the 2003 LA Poker Classic, and the 2004 WPT PokerStars Caribbean Adventure. Those wins, as well as winning the WPT Bad Boys of Poker event and a PokerStars Grand Final event in 2005, and being one of the first pros signed by Full Tilt, gave Gus an incredible amount of exposure to poker fans globally. In 2004, People magazine voted Gus one of their 50 sexiest men alive. Gus had a very good run, but his choice of games and his style of play kind of limited his long-term potential. From 2007 on, he took an absolute beating on Full Tilt. Between 2007 and 2014, he reportedly lost over $21 million online. As much as he dominated tournament play and did well in high-limit cash games in the early 2000s, online professionals destroyed him, and Gus didn't appear to know when to give up or step down to limits where he wouldn't face online pros who could easily crush him. Broke and with few options available to him, Gus did what the rest of us do. He got a regular job. He became an accountant. And he saved money being an accountant, and he also continued to play backgammon, which was a pretty lucrative gig for him, and he used that to build up his bankroll. In 2017, he announced a return to poker, but it appears as if he's focused more on cash games and not the tournament circuit. Gus is now a father, and he reportedly moved back to Denmark. His Twitter's kind of dead, but if you want to follow him, he is on Instagram, and it's a pretty active account. You got to admit, I'm coming at these profiles from all angles. I mean, genocide, Eskimo, not bad. Anyway, who's going to be next? Like, subscribe, click the notify button, and I'll catch you on the next one.